It was supposed to be a quiet morning at Hamerton Zoo Park in Cambridgeshire, England. Zookeeper Rosa King, just 33 years old, was tending to the animals she loved most, her lions. She had done this countless times before, but on this day, something went terribly wrong. Within moments, the stillness shattered. Staff screamed, visitors were rushed out, and Rosa was gone. What really happened inside that enclosure? Was it a tragic mistake, or something that could have been prevented? This is the story of Rosa King's final moments, mauled by the very lion she dedicated her life to caring for. And if you're just discovering this channel, welcome. Here we uncover the most shocking true animal attack stories from around the world. If you want more real-life investigations like this, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. It helps us tell these untold stories to a wider audience. She wasn't just a zookeeper. Rosa King was something else entirely. At just 33 years old, she had already built a reputation at Hamerton Zoo Park in Cambridgeshire as someone different. Someone who didn't just work with animals, she connected with them. Colleagues often said she had a kind of magic about her. They called her fearless, calm, devoted, and above all, passionate. Big cats were her world. While others kept their distance from the lions, Rosa got closer. She had studied them, watched their movements, listened to their silent language. She could tell when they were agitated, playful, hungry, or simply watching. And they trusted her. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. She had worked with them for years, giving every ounce of herself to their care. She wasn't just a keeper. She was a protector, an advocate, and some even said a friend to the pride behind the steel barriers. Visitors at Hamerton would often catch a glimpse of her walking along the enclosure fences, speaking softly to the lions like they were old friends. She moved with quiet confidence, never flinching, never fearful. To the public, it was inspiring. To the staff, it was Rosa being Rosa, the one person everyone trusted to be near the most dangerous animals on site. But on that warm bank holiday, Monday, May 29th, 2017, everything that made Rosa special would become the very reason she didn't make it out alive. And no one saw it coming. Because what happens when love for a wild animal meets instinct it can't control? What happens when a zookeeper becomes the prey? And most haunting of all, what did Rosa see in those final seconds when the animal she trusted turned against her? The answers begin in the lion house. Hamerton Zoo Park sat quietly on the edge of Cambridgeshire's countryside. A peaceful, family-friendly place, known more for its calm atmosphere than for danger. But deep behind the public walkways past the animal-themed cafes and souvenir shops stood the Lion House, and inside it, something terrifying was waiting to unfold. The lion enclosure wasn't just a pen, it was a system. A complex series of connected cages, steel gates, and shift corridors designed to keep predators and humans separate at all times. Each movement of the lions was carefully choreographed. Doors locked before others opened. Signals exchanged between keepers. The rule was clear and absolute. No zookeeper ever shares a space with a lion. Ever. Rosa King knew those protocols better than anyone. She had worked in the lion house countless times without incident. She understood the risks, but she also trusted the system. Trusted the locks, trusted the routines that were supposed to keep her safe. The structure of the lion house included off-show dens, where lions could be safely secured, while keepers cleaned or fed them through barriers. These were the invisible backstage zones, far from the smiling visitors, where Rosa spent most of her time. It was a routine she had performed again and again, almost to muscle memory. But that morning, Monday, May 29, 2017, Something in that system failed. Maybe it was a gate not properly shut. Maybe a lion wasn't fully secured in its holding pen. Or maybe for a split second, a deadly assumption was made. No one knows for certain what triggered the breakdown. What is known is that Rosa entered the enclosure believing the lion was locked away, and he wasn't. Zawadi, a massive full-grown male African lion, was not where he was supposed to be, and Rosa had just stepped into his territory in a space no human was ever meant to stand in. The door behind her closed. The moment was silent still. For a second, maybe she thought everything was fine. Just another check, another routine. But behind her, something moved, and by the time she turned around, it was too late. It was just past 11:15 a.m. on Monday, May 29th, 2017. A quiet, sunny bank holiday morning at Hamerton Zoo Park. Guests were already trickling in. Families with children strolled the gravel paths. The air was calm, light-hearted, completely unaware that something was about to go very, very wrong. Rosa King had already begun her morning duties, making her way to the lion house, as she had so many times before. This wasn't a show. There were no crowds, no cameras, just Rosa, her clipboard, and the routines she knew by heart. She was scheduled to check the feeding system, clean one of the back dens, and prepare enrichment activities. It was supposed to be simple, predictable. She stepped into the enclosure believing it was safe, and for a few moments it was. She moved through the space with ease, her focus fixed on the equipment in front of her. She didn't know that behind her something was watching. Something had slipped through the system. Zawadi, a full-grown male African lion, a predator Rosa had helped raise, trained, trusted. But now he was loose. Not in his secure pen, not behind the gates. He was in the same space, and Rosa didn't know. Then, without a warning growl, he lunged. The attack was sudden, explosive, the kind of raw animal violence no human can ever truly prepare for. Rosa had no time to react, no chance to reach the door, to call for help, to even scream. Zawadi's instincts had taken over. Visitors standing nearby heard it, a burst of shouting, a noise no one could quite place. Then the screaming started. Some thought it was part of a demonstration. Others froze, unsure of what they were witnessing. But zoo staff knew immediately something had gone terribly wrong inside the lion house. Panic spread across the park. Guests were told to evacuate. Children were rushed toward the exits. Emergency calls were made. Staff ran toward the enclosure, desperate to stop what had already begun. But by the time they reached her, Rosa King was gone. In under a minute, the woman who had given everything to those animals, every ounce of trust, every day of her life, was taken by the very creature she loved the most. And the worst part? She never saw it coming. The moment the first scream echoed across Hamerton Zoo Park, staff knew something was wrong. Horribly wrong. Within seconds, the emergency radio crackled to life. The words were short, panicked, chilling. Code red: lion enclosure, keep her down. Those few words shattered the stillness of the park. Around the ground, staff dropped what they were doing. Guests were hurried toward the exits. Parents clutched their children. Some visitors had no idea what was happening. Others had seen just enough to wish they hadn't. Sirens began to rise in the distance. Within minutes, ambulances, fire crews, and Cambridgeshire police flooded the scene. Zoo workers lined the paths, directing emergency teams toward the lion house. Their faces told the story before anyone spoke. Something unthinkable had happened inside. The park was placed on full lockdown. No one in, no one out. A sense of fear rippled through every corner of the zoo. Whispers spread. A keeper. The lions. Blood. But deep inside the lion house, the horror had already reached its end. Rosa King was found unresponsive inside the enclosure. Despite the frantic response and every effort to intervene, there was nothing anyone could do. The attack had been instant, devastating, fatal. She had died alone behind the steel gates, in the very habitat she had dedicated her life to protecting. And yet, amid the tragedy, one decision stood out. A decision that stirred debate, but ultimately reflected Rosa's own beliefs. The lion Zawadi was not euthanized. The zoo later explained this was not the animal's fault. There had been no provocation, no warning signs, just instinct. Pure, uncontrollable instinct. Zawadi had behaved like what he was, a wild predator, and Rosa, whether by trust routine or a tragic misstep, had stepped too close. But now the question loomed. How could such a devastating breach happen in a facility designed to prevent it? And was this just a tragic accident, or something far more preventable? The news hit like a thunderclap. Within hours of the tragedy, word of Rosa King's death had spread far beyond the quiet village of Hamerton. From national news outlets to international headlines, the unthinkable had happened. A beloved zookeeper, killed by the very animal she devoted her life to protecting. In homes across Cambridgeshire, televisions flickered with breaking updates. Zookeeper killed by lion in Cambridgeshire. The headlines read, "Tragedy at Hamerton. Zoo, Rosa King dead." But this wasn't just a headline. This was a person. As details emerged, so did the heartbreak. The public learned about who Rosa really was. Not just a keeper, but a woman whose life had been wrapped in care, compassion, and deep respect for animals others feared. Vigils began to appear outside the zoo's gates. Bouquets, handwritten cards, photos, messages from strangers. Visitors who had once seen Rosa on her morning rounds returned not to see the lions, but to honor her. Some left candles, others just stood in silence. Online thousands posted tributes. Fellow zookeepers from around the world shared her story. Animal lovers wrote messages of sorrow and solidarity. And then came the statement that, from Hamerton Zoo Park, Rosa was a passionate, dedicated keeper who loved her work. She will be greatly missed, and her loss leaves a hole in our team and in our hearts. It wasn't just a loss to the zoo, it was a wound felt across the entire animal care community. And yet, as the grief settled, the world began asking harder questions. How could this have happened? What went wrong behind those gates? And the most painful question of all, did Rosa die doing what she loved, or was her death a result of a system that failed her? Answers were coming, but they would only deepen the heartbreak. In the days that followed Rosa King's death, grief turned into questions, and questions turned into a formal investigation. The Health and Safety Executive, Britain's national regulator for workplace safety, launched a full inquiry into what had happened inside the lion enclosure at Hamerton Zoo Park on that deadly Monday morning. What they found was as chilling as it was tragic. Preliminary reports pointed to one conclusion. Something went wrong with the enclosure system. Whether it was a procedural failure, a moment of human error, or a malfunctioning gate, the result was the same. A predator ended up in the same space as its keeper. It's believed that one of the sliding gates designed to separate the lions from human access areas either failed to lock properly or was left partially unsecured. Somehow the system that was meant to protect Rosa allowed Zawadi to access the very area she had entered alone. And that raises a devastating truth. Zookeepers are never supposed to be in the same enclosure as a lion. It's one of the most fundamental safety principles in animal care. No direct contact with apex predators. The entire enclosure layout, its shift gates, night dens, isolation pens exists for that one purpose. So how did Rosa, of all people, end up face-to-face with a full-grown lion? Had she believed the gate was locked? Was a light on the control panel misleading? Or was it something far more human, a moment of routine mistaken for safety? The HSE did not release a finding of foul play or gross negligence, but what they did do was force a change. In the aftermath of Rosa's death, safety protocols at Hamerton Zoo were overhauled. Systems were reviewed, procedures tightened, training enhanced. But none of it could turn back time. None of it could answer the most haunting question of all. If just one mechanism had worked the way it was supposed to, would Rosa still be alive? Zawadi wasn't just any lion. To Rosa King, he was part of a pride she had nurtured, trained, and protected for years. She knew his habits, his moods, the subtle tilt of his head, the way he paced when he was restless, and the way he responded to her voice. There was a bond between them. Of that, no one had any doubt. Rosa had formed a connection with Zawadi that few others ever dared to attempt. She believed in compassion over control, in relationship over fear. And perhaps that belief cost her everything. Because while Zawadi may have recognized Rosa, his instincts didn't. The truth, as painful as it is, cannot be softened. Zawadi was still a lion, a 700-pound apex predator built by nature to hunt, to dominate, and to survive. His claws weren't dulled by affection. His instincts weren't rewritten by routine. And on that day, something deep inside him took over. There was no malice, no plan, just a split-second reawakening of the wild that had always lived inside him. She had loved him. And in a way, he may have loved her. But love doesn't cancel out instinct. And in that unforgiving moment, Rosa wasn't his keeper. She was just there in his territory. It's a haunting question that lingers in the silence left behind. Can wild truly be tamed? Or do we only borrow peace from predators until the day they remember what they are? The cage may have bars. The system may have locks. The keeper may offer kindness. But in the end, nature always decides. Rosa King's death didn't just devastate her loved ones and co-workers. It sent shockwaves through an entire industry. Across the UK and far beyond, zoos were forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Conversations turned to keeper safety emergency protocols and the ethics of holding wild animals in captivity. Behind closed doors, institutions reviewed their own practices. What happened at Hamerton Zoo Park was no longer just an isolated tragedy. It was a warning. But even as policies shifted and procedures tightened, the bigger questions still lingered in the air like smoke from a fire long extinguished. Was this preventable? Could a different system, a second pair of eyes, one more lock or light or check have saved her? And if not, should keepers ever be alone with animals like Zawadi at all? Some say no, that no matter how experienced, no matter how well-intentioned, it's simply too great a risk. But others, especially those like Rosa, believe that true animal care requires trust, connection, presence. So then comes the question that truly stings. Can genuine affection override a predator's nature? Or is it only ever an illusion, a fragile thread we hope will hold until the moment it snaps? What Rosa left behind was more than tragedy. She left behind a legacy of compassion, dedication, and a line of questions we're still struggling to answer. And maybe that's the most terrifying part of all. Rosa King gave everything she had to the animals in her care. Her time, her energy, her trust, and ultimately her life. But in the end, it was that very love that cost her everything. So now we're left asking, was it simply a tragic mistake? Or was it something far more haunting? A deadly reminder that no matter how strong the bond, nature cannot be tamed. If this story moved you, like and share this video to honor Rosa's memory. And subscribe for more real heartbreaking animal stories that the world should never forget. Thanks for watching.